This is the Literary License Podcast, classic novel episode, dealing with classics you must read before you die, and finding new life in between the dusty covers, exploring page to screen and everything in between with your co-hosts, Jesse Coates, Vicky Ray, Leandro Getzi, and Keith Chalgo, who ensure to bring the fun to an old standard.
Hello, welcome to Literary License Podcast, and today this is our classic novels, and we're covering Call of the Wild from 1903 by Jack London, and the film Call of the Wild from 1935 starring Clark Gable and Loretta Young. And before we get started, let's find out who's with us today. Today we have cderrickcloud-miller. Hello, Chad. How are you?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Been a while.
Yes, it has.
And we have Jesse Foltz. Hello, Jesse.
Hey, how's everyone doing?
Leandro Gazzi. Hello, Leandro.
Hello, how are you? Good?
Hey, Leandro.
And Vicky Ray.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see everybody again.
And myself, Keith Shago. And before we get started, let's find out what everyone's been up to. So, Chad, what's the last thing? Well, what have you been up to since last time we spoke to you?
My latest novella, Starving Zoe, released a couple of months ago. It's part of Death Head Press's Splatter Western series.
Yes, I've been watching you advertise it. I've got to get a copy.
It's very divisive. It is a splatterpunk novella, and I went back to some of the splatterpunk roots. I read a lot of Edward Lee.
Define splatterpunk for people who don't know it.
Splatterpunk is extreme horror, extreme gore, extreme violence, and it's just really strange. I finally read Catcher in the Rye for the first time in 46 years. I didn't see what all the fuss was about, why it was just, this huge novel that just started basic rebellion. I guess I read it too late in life, but I loved the narration. I loved just being inside the guy's head the entire time while he just rambled. So I wanted to do a horror novel using that same voice. So that was about the time that Death's Head Press contacted me for a splatterpunk Western. So I decided to use that narrative, and it's been really divisive. Either you love it or you hate it. There's really no in between. So
I love gore, so I'll be buying it.
Well, I made it character accurate for 1865, and there's a lot of people in the I guess you could call it the woke community who think that I may have taken it a little too far, but
then that means it's good.
Then there are other people who are calling it one of the best things they've read in 2020. So, and I know there's been a lot of things read in 2020, so that says a lot. But it's right down the middle. It's very divisive. Either you're going to love it or you're not. And it's about to come out in hardback and audiobook as well. And I can't wait to hear somebody say some of those lines that are in there out loud. I think it'd be great.
Well, now I've got to get it.
Yeah, it's a quick read novella. I want to say about 140 pages. You can probably finish it in a few hours. Every single one of these books in the Splatter Western series are phenomenal. Mine just happens to be the most divisive so far. So,
well, I like that. If it's divisive, that means I'll read it.
Well, I hope you love it.
And Leandro, what have you been up to?
I went back to work for a month and a bit, and then we are in lockdown again. So I have been reading, watching movies, working in 2 allotments that I have. Basically that. And
yourself, Jesse? How was Salem?
Oh, it was great. It was wintry this time because this was the second time I went back, for Halloween and whatnot. And then there was a winter snow warning, so the trip was actually delayed, but I still made it to all the tours. One of the tours we had to reschedule for another day.
What did you go for?
Just a couple days.
It seemed like you were there a week.
Well, yeah, because I was there the week prior, and then I went back again the next week for Halloween. Because it's close by to where I am, so it's not like it's far or anything like that. So you can go for like a day's trip and then go back if you want. But yeah, I managed to find warm enough attire so I didn't have to wear like winter gear and stuff like that. I just wore my warmest costume pieces, I guess.
I liked your outfit. That was really cute. You looked really fashionable, to say the least.
Well, thank you. Yeah, lots of people were commenting on my outfit, and they said it looked professional, which was good because I don't like, when I do things for Halloween, I kind of like to go big or go home. I don't like to do the cheap Walmart stuff because it's not the same.
Yes, he's going to be our cover boy.
Yeah. So yeah, I totally like going all out for Halloween. So that's kind of, what I did. We had like a few different tours. The next time I actually want to go to the Witch Dungeon Museum. I heard that one's one of the best museums that they have there. But I did like the Salem Witch Trials tour, and then there was a ghost tour that we did. Trying to think of the other one. Was there another one? I don't know. That was kind of it. And then we did
the House of the Seven Gables and stuff like that. Did you go to the Witch's Hill?
Sadly, no, because all the tickets were booked up like months ago, so there wasn't anything available.
I imagine it would be because people were wanting to get out, and it's a cool place. I haven't been in years. So
yeah. It's crazy because there were cops everywhere because they were really trying to, keep people from even coming into Salem and telling people that everything for Halloween was closed, even though that wasn't entirely true.
Oh, dirty bastards.
Yeah, and then the cops would usher everybody out after 8:00 because everything would close down and they wanted everyone to leave. So it was kind of there was a bit of a time crunch, but it looked like people still got to do what they wanted. You had to wait in like hour-long lines just to get into a shop, which was really crazy. And you obviously couldn't get into anything without wearing a mask. And I was barely able to take even a couple photos without a mask on for taking it off for like a brief second. So that was kind of crazy. But otherwise, yeah, it was still fun. And actually the snow only lasted like a day. It melted the very next day, and it was actually quite warm. So it got much colder at night, of course, but it was still fun.
What about yourself, Vix? What have you been up to?
Absolutely nada. I've just been reading a lot. I haven't been feeling good the last week, so I've caught up on a lot of movies, and I watched something. What was it called? The Barbarians on Netflix. It has one season. I binge watched the whole season, and then it's just like nothing. I'm depressed because I want to watch more. It was really good. I finally got to watch the director's cut of Nightbreed. That was I didn't think I was going to like it. I've avoided that movie. I don't know why, but it was actually really good. And I watched the Mortuary Collection. Didn't you guys catch that one?
Yep.
On Amazon.
Shudder.
I loved how it ended. I was not expecting that. That was really cool. So that was fun. But other than that, things are kind of chilling down now, and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do for our holidays, and if we have holidays this year.
Yeah, right.
Or it's like, I don't know. It's just this year just totally fucking sucked. That's all I got to say.
maybe it wouldn't be too bad if we all took kind of a vacation from holidays. I mean, just a year without having to deal with majority of my family is absolutely wonderful. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm not sure.
I would, I just can't wait to see the Thanksgiving celebrations where there's alcohol involved this year.
Well, myself, we're going back into lockdown for the next month, so I'll still be going back to work. This week I was off ill from work, so I caught up on a lot of odds and ends. I'm reading Killing for Company, which is a book about Dennis Nielsen, who's a serial killer that's been given to me to review, written by Brian Masters, which is very, very good. ITV has just made a movie out of it, starring the Scottish bloke from Doctor Who, playing Dennis Nielsen, the serial killer, which is quite good. It all takes place in the area that we live, so that's quite interesting to see all the places, Muswell Hill and Kentish Town, job center where he worked. And so the book. So I'm reading that book. Watched a new Spanish series, which I highly recommend, called Barriers, which is excellent, which is available on Netflix. And I also been watching a lot of Christmas movies, those Hallmark Christmas movies when I'm ill.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, they made me feel bad. I just sit there because you can fall asleep, and when you wake because like the plot's the same for every single one, so it's kind of fine. So
That's like
so it's good. It's good when your mental capacity is not 100%. So
I usually fall asleep and wake up and The Exorcist is on because of the channels I watch. It's like, oh, this highly vibrational movie is on, and I'm waking up to it.
But I watched a couple of things on Shudder. The animated special for Creepshow was quite interesting. I
didn't see that. Was that all animated?
Yeah, it's animated. It's about 50 minutes long. One story is by Stephen King. The other story is by Joe Hill. So it's interesting to see how father and son attack the world of horror. So you can kind of compare them side by side. The animation is more like a animated comic book style.
Does it look like the 80s?
No, it's an animated comic book style. So.
No, I know, but is it like the 80s, like kind of genre kind of look?
To be honest, Joe Hill's story is a lot better than but it's more about narrative because it's more about someone reading you a short story and there's some animation going on behind the person telling you the short story. It's not done in an 80s kind of way. It's done more as a comic book. Those animated comic books, whether you've seen Buffy the animated comic book or any of those, it's done like that. So there's not a lot of movement.
That's on Netflix or Shudder?
Shudder. It's on Shudder, so that's quite good. So that brings us to Story Geek. Story Geek is going to tell you what you can watch in the COVID crisis, what you can download, stream, or just watch through the comfort of your own home during these lockdown COVID times. So take it away, Story Geek.
What movies and TV shows should you be watching the week of November 2nd? Yeah, there's an election going on, but there's also a lot of new content, so let's jump into that. I'm Jay Shear, co-writer and director of Death of a Bounty Hunter, the supernatural steampunk western, coming out as a full cast audiobook on November 9th, 2020. I hope you'll check that out. Well, according to Metacritic, there's a new movie coming to theaters on Friday. Kevin Costner and Diane Lane star in a movie about a couple trying to rescue their grandson from a dangerous family. I don't know what that means, but it has a 65 from Metacritic, and it's in theaters. So if a theater is open near you, you can probably go see this movie. It's not bad to have new movies in theaters. New on Netflix, lots of new content this month, so you're going to hear me read off a lot of movies. But on Netflix, here are some of the higher Metacritic rated movies. Prospect, Boys in the Hood, Chappelle's Show, which if you have not seen Chappelle's Show, it is an absolute must-watch. It is hilarious. A Clockwork Orange, Easy A, The Impossible, Ocean's 11, which I thought was already on Netflix, but apparently it was not. And finally, Platoon. Of those, my two must-watches are Chappelle's Show, as I mentioned, and Ocean's 11, which is a fantastic film, and the best, in my opinion, of the Ocean films. Over on Amazon Prime, we've got a bunch of new content over there as well. 28 Days Later, As Good as It Gets, Boys in the Hood, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Dead Poets Society, The Insider, The Last Waltz, Platoon, which was also on Netflix, Romancing the Stone, Ronin, The Sapphires, and Silverado. Of those options, I highly recommend Ronin, a great action spy movie, and I also recommend Romancing the Stone, which is sort of an Indiana Jones ripoff, but it's actually pretty good, so you should go check it out. Disney Plus has really only added The Mandalorian, but I loved the first episode of Season 2. New episodes are coming every Friday, and I cannot wait for more Mandalorian content. And finally, over on Hulu, probably the most of any movies that were added in terms of higher rated Metacritic films. Antoine Fisher, The Blair Witch Project, The Bourne Trilogy, all three of the Matt Damon films. Broadcast News, Crimson Tide, a ton of classic James Bond flicks. The Horse Whisperer, HUD, Kingdom of Heaven, Knocked Up, The Last Waltz, Lord of War. By the way, fun fact, Lord of War was the movie that I saw on my first date with my wife. So I guess I owe Nick Cage something for that. Not a great first date movie, but we're still together. So that's good news for me. I owe Nick Cage something, I guess. Maverick, Platoon, The Prestige, Ronin, Sweeney Todd, Wanted, and Working Girl. Of all of those movies over there on Hulu, I recommend Kingdom of Heaven, which I think is a fantastic film, and I think a lot of people did not see it. The Bourne trilogy is fantastic. Ronin, as I already mentioned, is really, really good. And The Prestige, which is phenomenal as well. All those are fantastic. You can't lose. Are you looking for a new podcast or a new audiobook? As I said at the beginning of this segment, our new audiobook, Death of a Bounty Hunter, is coming out on November 9th. We're extremely excited about it, and can't wait for you to hear it. deathofabountyhunter.com will have more information on how to access this new audiobook starting this week, so please go check that out. I hope that you will take a listen and let us know what you think. This has been Jay Shearer, and I hope you have fun watching movies and TV shows wherever you find them. Welcome back to Literary License Podcast, and we're discussing Call of the Wild from 1903 by Jack London. What we're going to do is cut to the synopsis, which has been pre-recorded, and we'll be right back to discuss Call of the Wild by Jack Wild from 1903.
Buck, a powerful dog, half St. Bernard and half sheepdog, lives on Judge Miller's estate in California's Santa Clara Valley. He leads a comfortable life there, but it comes to an end when men discover gold in the Klondike region of Canada, and a great demand arises for strong dogs to pull sleds. Buck is kidnapped by a gardener on the Miller estate and sold to dog traders, who teach Buck to obey by beating him with a club and subsequently ship him north to the Klondike. Arriving in the chilly north, Buck is amazed by the cruelty he sees around him. As soon as another dog from the ship, Curly, gets off the boat, a pack of huskies violently attacks and kills her. Watching her death, Buck vows never to let the same fate befall him. Buck becomes the property of Francois and Perrault, two mail carriers working for the Canadian government, and begin to adjust to life as a sled dog. He rediscovers the instincts of his wildest ancestors. He learns to fight, scavenge for food, and sleep beneath the snow on winter nights. At the same time, he develops a fierce rivalry with Spitz, the lead dog in the team. One of their fights is broken up when a pack of wild dogs invades the camp, but Buck begins to undercut Spitz's authority, and eventually the two dogs become involved in a major fight. Buck kills Spitz and takes his place as the lead dog. With Buck at the head of the team, Francois and Perrault's sled makes record time. However, the men soon turn the team over to a small carrier who forces the dogs to carry much heavier loads. In the midst of a particularly arduous trip, one of the dogs becomes ill, and eventually the driver has to shoot him. At the end of this journey, the dogs are exhausted, and the mail carriers sell them to a group of American gold hunters, Hal, Charles, and Mercedes. Buck's new masters are inexperienced and out of place in the wilderness. They overload the sled, beat the dogs, and plan poorly. Halfway through their journey, they begin to run out of food while the humans bicker. The dogs begin to starve, and the weaker animals soon die. Of an original team of 14, only 5 are still alive when they limp into John Thornton's camp, still some distance from their destination. Thornton warns them that the ice over which they are traveling is melting and that they may fall through it. Hal dismisses these warnings and tries to get going immediately. The other dogs begin to move, but Buck refuses. When Hal begins to beat him, Thornton intervenes, knocking a knife from Hal's hand and cutting Buck loose. Hal curses Thornton and starts the sled again, but before they have gone a quarter of a mile, the ice breaks open, swallowing both the humans and the dogs. Thornton becomes Buck's master, and Buck's devotion to him is total. He saves Thornton from drowning in a river, attacks a man who tries to start a fight with Thornton in the bar, and most remarkably, wins a $1,600 wager for his new master by pulling a sled carrying a 1,000-pound load. But Buck's love for Thornton is mixed with a growing attraction to the wild, and it feels as if he's being caroled away from civilization and into the wilderness. This feeling grows stronger when he accompanies Thornton and his friends in search of a lost mine hidden deep in the Canadian forest. While the men search for gold, Buck ranges for a field, befriending wolves and hunting bears and moose. He always returns to Thornton in the end, until one day he comes back to camp to find that the Yehat Indians have attacked and killed his master. Buck attacks the Indians, killing several and scattering the rest, and then becomes a legendary figure, a ghost dog, fathering countless cubs and inspiring fear in the Yehats. But every year he returns to the place where Thornton died to mourn his master before returning to his life in the wild.
Hello, welcome back to Literary License Podcast, and we're now going to discuss Call of the Wild from 1903 by Jack London. So, Chad, what are your thoughts of Call of the Wild by Jack London?
Well, I actually got kicked out of the Jack London bar in Portland, Oregon once because I wasn't wearing a suit and tie. But then I found out Jack London isn't even from Portland, Oregon, and I'm like, what the hell? But I read this book as a child, and I didn't remember much about it other than, you know, the base synopsis. Jack London wrote a lot of books along these lines. I just recently reread it over the last couple of weeks to prepare for this podcast. As an adult, I loved it. I even think maybe this would be, you know, something more fitted toward like a young adult, someone who's just now getting into reading. I think it's very short. I guess they call it a short novel, somewhere in between that novella novel level. Overall, just really good book. There's a lot of books that came out around this time period. 1903, I believe it was when it was first released. There's a lot of people that call things classic, and I say repeatedly that just because something is old doesn't mean it's classic. This is indeed a classic.
Mr. Leandro, what are your thoughts? Your initial thoughts?
I enjoy it. I like the way he described the places. I mean, I've never been in that area of USA, but I really like it. But me being I love dogs. I didn't, of course, the story like I like it, but so because it's not like a happy dog, right? It has a lot of things that happen, but I like that at the end, at least he like got what he was looking after. So it was really, really cool. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
And Jesse?
Yeah, I liked the book. I thought it was really fascinating about it was kind of like the first what do you call, like, the dog fight thing. I don't know when they started doing that, but I thought that whole thing was fascinating. And it makes me want a dog like that because I had a really nice husky when I was a kid, and it kind of just reminded me of that. And my husky was actually gutted because it wandered onto someone's property, and my dad was in charge of it that day. So,
oh God.
Yeah, so it just made me miss my dog and kind of reminded me of.
That was an ugly visual, Jess.
I'm sorry, but it happened. I don't know, and I don't know.
I love animals.
I haven't had a pet dog since, so not my own, but I love dogs too. It's yeah. So at least this animal gets a good owner that doesn't slay him.
And what are your initial thoughts, Vix?
Well, it's initially about the Call of the Wild. You know how this dog has to go through all. It's told through the dog's eyes. You know, and that's why I found so engaging, because this dog can get in the dog's head and all the owners that have owned him, and he was just your typical California guy, and he got kidnapped and sold into slavery basically, and then he found his favorite person, like most dogs will find their favorite person eventually, I hope, because I love dogs. But I loved how that they made how they explain, how he's the protagonist, and how you have him and Spitz, and you have, the dogs all vying for position, or at least these two particular dogs. And just how the story just goes on, and how he keeps hearing the wild. He knows it's kind of probably like in a dog's genetic makeup, because I grew up in northern New York, as did Keith, and I've had dogs that kind of, used to take off for days and just go running, and they'd come back. So, and actually that was a husky. So that, I thought it was a very engaging book, and I agree with Chad. It's probably something that I would like to probably read to Asher because it's such a good book, and I love White Fang and all of these novels. They're just excellent, good first reads for any child. But I found it very engaging.
And myself, I've never read Call of the Wild for some reason. It bypassed me when I was growing up. So reading it this time, I quite like the idea that Jack London was able to bring the theory of Charles Darwin, which is quite newish at this time about his evolution, was also be able to bring in the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche as well, which I thought was quite good. That his worldview is that the world was composed of masters, those who can possess, that he called the will to power, and slaves, those who do not have possessed this will. And I thought that was quite interesting to see that basically you start off with Buck. Basically, he's a spoiled dog. And then what he has to do to survive in this cruel world. And unfortunately, in this cruel world, I mean, it does, you're dealing with a lot of deaths, a lot of people he comes close to. And but then you can also look at it as like an allegory of your life sort of thing, because with Buck going forward with his life, and as you're going on this journey with Buck, outside of one short chapter that basically is written from another person's point of view, we're kind of with Buck from beginning to end. And basically, like, the people who pass in and out of Buck's life do touch him in a certain way, whether it's good or bad.
He learns something from each owner.
Yeah, and even and I have to sit there and say the only problem that I would find with Call of the Wild is that some of the evil characters don't get their comeuppance, and you kind of want that to happen. You want to see Buck, with the man with the great big club who almost clubs him to death, and you want to see Buck get vengeance on that person, but of course that doesn't happen, and I think that's what makes this quite interesting, is that what you do have basically is like life itself, that sometimes you get something horrible happens to you, but you don't have the vengeance. You kind of move on. You have to move on to your next chapter in your life. And I like the way that Jack London was able to provide that with Call of the Wild.
But they did have some kind of understanding, him and the man. I mean, he did beat him into submission, but then he did show him some kindness once he was obedient. But I mean, he had some kind of mutual respect, maybe, possibly.
Well, I think it's it's prisoner and jailer, isn't it?
Stockholm syndrome, maybe.
Well, maybe not so much Stockholm syndrome, but the simple fact is that if you live by you have to live by the sword, sort of thing, and basically Buck's gonna go off into his next chapter in his life, so you kind of have to put up with it. I mean, you either put up with it or die, isn't it? That's what it is. That's what the whole story is about. You have
survival.
to. It's for survival, and you have to do what you have to do to survive. And
I forgot how it ended, though. I was rather disappointed. I hadn't read this since I was like probably 8th grade, and I totally forgot the ending was so sad, But then Buck does have the common sense for a dog, but he does, get his revenge on the Ehad Indians for killing his master, But you kind of thought once they found the proverbial cabin in the woods that it's like, oh, they found their gold, everything's going to be great, But it doesn't always work out that way.
Well, I mean, man is always driven by greed. That's what man's driven by through the whole story, is to greed, isn't it?
There's a life lesson here.
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, Buck gets stolen by a man through greed. He's sold off for greed. He's even with the male people, the French guy, I forgot what their names are. But then when he moves on, that's for greed. Mercedes and the other two, that was for greed. And Jack Thornton, he would still be alive today if it wasn't for greed for the gold. He would not have crossed the Ehad Indians' territory.
Oh, that was Perot and Francois.
Yeah, but that was kind of greed as well. They wanted to be world recognized for getting the mail there on time, no matter what. Pushing the dogs to the end limit, sort of thing. Though they did feed them a little bit, but they didn't feed them a lot, did they? They fed them enough to keep them alive.
Well, if you've ever noticed other specials and stuff where they don't feed huskies a whole lot, and sled dogs do not eat a whole lot. I mean, they're not like my dogs, my little ankle biters here. They probably eat more than most huskies do. That's probably why they're all fat and lazy. But huskies are different, I've noticed. But that's because, I don't know, I used to own quite a few of them. They were my favorite dogs. I have to admit, there was always that one dog you owned in your life that you loved the most. And for me, it was like my Husky Blue. I love that dog.
1 in 10,000.
Yeah, there's always one dog that always sticks out in your mind forever and ever. It was that one dog. Everybody's got one. I don't know about Keith. Keith, do you have that one dog?
My dog I had when I was got him when I was 2 years old, and he lived until I was about 17. His name was Festus, and the reason why his name was Festus is because when I was 2 years old, my parents used to watch Gunsmoke, and for some reason I loved the character Festus, and that's one of the only names I would say. So my dog's name was Festus. So
that's funny. I can see that.
So. But I had other dogs through the years, sort of thing. I had a white collie named Nelly because he's supposed to be like this really butch of a dog, but he's kind of quite a feminine male dog. So I used to call it Nelly. So
why don't you just name him Nana, for God's sake?
Yeah, but I mean, the only reason I don't have a dog now is because the responsibility and working a lot and being able, and I think that you have to kind of be home during the day at some point to walk it during the day.
You do.
Well, to bond with it, if you're not around it, it's going to bond with someone else who is around.
I mean, if I had a purse, if I carried a handbag with me, maybe I'd get a dog and take it to work.
Oh Lord!
But really,
what are you, Paris Hilton?
Paris Hilton, her chihuahuas.
Yeah. But I have a cat as big as a dog, so that's fine.
That's mine. My dog. No one can see my dog. It's a bioengineered nightmare. Is what it is.
So I mean, Call of the Wild. I think it's one of those books that I think everyone should actually read at some point in their life. I mean,
White Fang too.
It is a very harsh David Attenborough documentary wildlife kind of thing, though. I mean, I didn't believe how violent and brutal it was. I wasn't expecting that. That really took me by surprise.
Yeah, but that was nothing to children in 1903. That was day-to-day occurrence happening in the front lawn.
Life. Well, that was survival back then. I mean, think about putting yourself in. Okay, well, we grew up in upstate New York. Just think of the survival 30 years ago. We used to have to walk to the store during blizzards. Can you imagine living like that every day?
Right.
Well,
I had something to say when I was doing some research on this book. A film came up, a Disney film with with Paul Walker called Eight.
I love that movie, Eight Below. I love that movie.
And what was funny is that people, when it came out, it did reasonably well. But now with the new world, new world order that we're now living in, people were complaining about how cruel it was for animals and how unfair it was and how basically unrealistic that no one would let this happen to animals. This is like, oh my God, if they read Call of the Wild now, with the new generation.
Well, I did struggle with that movie myself, though, because I was going, oh my God, they left his dogs there, and they were there for, was it like all winter during a brutal Antarctic winter, I think, and these dogs, they manage, they do.
Well, I think 3 of them survived, didn't it? 3 of them survived.
2 of them actually came back. It was Mia, and what was the other one? What was that dog's name?
Yeah, but it's like they have to leave, and then they left it there, and Paul Walker didn't want. And then when they went back, he finally went back. They were all I think there were 10 of them, and then I think 2 of them died. Something like that.
One of them died on the line and stuff. That just distressed me. I can watch people get mutilated and slasher flicks all day long, but if you kill a dog, that's my undoing. Just please don't kill the dog.
Yeah, that's horrible. I've played some video games lately where you have to kill a dog and you're like, God, do I really have to do this?
I'd rather kill the people. People deserve it. Dogs don't.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, but you also you kind of have to look at it to a certain extent, where it's kind of like when it becomes between pet or animal and your own survival, though, and how do you choose? You know, and I think that's when you kind of have to like take a step back and kind of look at things. It's kind of, I mean, I think that with the and we were doing The Road, which is about, you know, the end of the world sort of thing, and Cassandra was with us, and John and I were discussing about what you would have to do and about to survive, and whether you would have to eat people or not. And I basically said that I would eat Isaac before I ate my cat, because my cat actually means more to me in a weird sense, because your pet becomes so close to you, sort of thing, as far as animals are concerned. And it's, but you know, when it comes down to pets, but I guess when you look at, you know, but when you do look at 8 Below or Call of the Wild, which we're discussing now, Buck is no one's pet. He doesn't become anyone's pet until in the beginning he's someone's pet, and then he becomes equals with Jack Thornton at the end of the book. But at that point, Buck is not a pet. Buck is like a farm animal. Buck is like the cow that you're going to slaughter later on for your hamburgers, or the pig.
I'm sure there was a lot of dog meat being digested back in the day, because I mean, think about it. There was times when there wasn't any supplies getting into some of these towns like Skagway and all those points north, and they talk about it. You know, where sometimes, you know, I just don't think I could eat one of my dogs. I just can't do it.
Well, I think it's also you have to look at the simple fact is horses, for instance. You know, the people go, oh, you know, when you watch a Western, the horse horse tumbles over and they have to shoot the horse. And I go, oh my God, sort of thing. But I don't think they realize that the horse's role is not a pet horse. This horse is to get you from point A to point B, and it's like your car.
It's a vehicle. It's a tool.
Precisely.
Yeah, but people like their horses. This is Texas. I mean, you'd probably be tarred and feathered for saying that term.
You know, and I can't officially back this up with paperwork, but I hear that the meat is actually more succulent than like hamburger, than like cow.
Well, somebody tricked me. We were in France, and I didn't know what a cheval burger was. That's all I've got to say.
I have a university professor that she was working in China, and that she went to a restaurant. And I said, oh, yeah, try this. And she said, because she knew that in China they eat dogs. And said, dog. And then she was a bit reluctant and said, no, it's not dog. She tried. And then I thought, this meat is a bit sweet. And then later they said, yeah, but you ate dog. And she was really furious. I
would have been upset. They eat a lot of cats too.
I tried dog once. I have tried it. I have tried it in a Korean restaurant.
Can see the look I'm giving you right now.
In a Korean restaurant in the great state of Georgia this week. Really? In America, they're the great state of Georgia. Yes, I was actually I was in the military with a guy whose family actually lived in the same city that we were stationed in, and his family owned a Korean restaurant, and they had very, very small portions of it. And I did try a bite just to say that I've done it. And I mean, I wouldn't dare tell the dogs, but it wasn't all that bad, guys.
Wasn't all that bad. That's like when somebody wanted me to try alligator or whatever it was, and I actually liked it.
Alligator's good.
Alligator's greasy.
But I have to sit there and say, what's the difference between that and a calf?
It's called socialized. Yeah. It's just like we're great. It's sort of like some of my friends who are like very much into reincarnation are totally distraught about eating eggs and cows.
I found the answer for this. I don't know if you have seen a movie called Life of Pi.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Yeah. Life of Pi.
I think it's like when you are in front of like, okay, if I don't eat what is in front of me, I will die. You will grab all whatever your beliefs and everything, and then you put it in your pocket, and you have to eat, because otherwise you will die. I personally, I don't know. I could never eat a dog or my pets. No way, I will die. But it's hard.
Yeah, but if you're part of a Chilean football team and you get crashed in the middle of the mountains somewhere, you might have to eat your relative. So.
That was terrible, though. Wasn't that book Alive? That's a really messed up story, but it's very
Argentina, and I think from Uruguay. I don't know, but there's still few players that did they alive, and they said that it was like, of course, when you go back to society, you can't believe what you have done. But if you're about to die, literally, then you don't have any choice. Well,
God, they were drinking their own urine too. I mean, that talk about survival.
I don't know
Good
that.
Lord.
That's major survival. Okay, that's like I can't even imagine what those poor people, the therapy that they must have had to go through after cannibalizing their friends to live. So I mean, but that kind of stuff. Well, you had the Donner Party too. That was another fucked up story.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting story too. I mean, I've yet to find the perfect book on it, but I'm really fascinated with the Donner Party too.
Well, you also had that other one about Alfred Packer in Colorado as well. He was this Mormon. They made a musical out of his life story.
Of course.
Yeah, but Trey Parker and Matt Stone did a musical on it called Cannibal the Musical. But Alfred Packer was this person who was this Mormon, and they were in Colorado, and he said that he got roped into leading these people across the Colorado mountains into going back to Utah. Well, let's just say he didn't know what he was doing, and they kept going around in a circle, and got to the point where he's the only one that came back, and everyone else in this party weren't so lucky. And then when they did find the bodies, all they found was he pretty much ate his way through them as he made his way for his own survival.
Oh, wow.
So, but I think that I mean, in Call of the Wild, I mean, going back to that, I mean, it's lucky that the people who did own buck or were using buck as their way of transportation, it's a good thing they probably knew where they were going, because if they didn't, then buck might have been buck steak by the end of it. So they might have been a totally different book.
But then you got those idiots, Hal and Mercedes, and the ones that wanted to put all that stuff on the sled. And he was a really bad musher, for one. They were really cruel to the animals. And they just had no knowledge whatsoever about survival or anything else. So you saw what was coming to them eventually. You kind of saw that tunnel visions, like these guys aren't going to make it. So,
well, Mercedes and the other two guys, they're kind of like those people who show up at at Mount Everest. They're going to climb Mount Everest, and all they brought with them was like some electric socks.
Windbreaker.
Some heated socks. So and it had to say that was quite an interesting thing, because then what we got, because you had you got the first third of the book, and you kind of dealing with like people who knew what they were doing, sort of thing, even though you thought you had more that the buck and the other dogs and where their stations and lives are, and where they and basically trying to get dominance, and that where buck eventually does with Spitz. So you kind of got that, and then the next part of the book is like, so this is what happens when people are inexperienced and they hire a sled dog team.
Yeah. Well, no, they bought their own sled dog team and had no knowledge of what to do with it at all. And then they've got the spring thaw, and even if you've got common sense in your head, that spring is coming, and you're not going to drive out into Lake Ontario and do, donuts with your Cherokee,
Did everyone say that they didn't see the most modern update of the film, like the 2020 Harrison Ford?
I haven't seen that one yet.
I saw it, and there's actually the big change in it is there's no Indians whatsoever. There's no native whatsoever. It's one of the people, I guess it's Hal, that survives. And he comes back and tries to kill Buck's master at the end, because he thinks that he led them wrong and caused the dogs and the other people he was with to die. And
they actually didn't die though in the movie, because I thought maybe they, because I was disappointed, because I thought maybe they died off screen. First of all, the new version that Chad's talking about is very woke.
Right.
We no longer have a French
much.
guy. We now have a black Nigerian guy. We no longer have another guy. We now have an Indian woman. It's very woke.
It's Disney, is it not? Is it Disney?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
They're finding ways not to offend everybody, but but make it inclusive of everyone. So, so I thought they died as well. But when he came back, he says this one line. He goes, "They abandoned me." So it's like, so they didn't even kill them off. So it's kind of like,
okay.
Well,
they
didn't
abandoned
screw
him.
the old Silver Screen.
Because I rewound it. I had to rewound it. It's like, oh, did they die? It's like, because they didn't show it on screen, but it's like, no, they abandoned. So they didn't have the sense to kill them off. Like, because he goes, beware of the thin ice, and you see them go off. And then it's like, then the guy comes back and I'm like, what?
Well, I fell victim to the Disney plan. I saw, a fairly decent looking movie with wonderful cinematography based on a beautiful novel with Harrison Ford. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'll just buy this without even watching it first.
Right?
And
Oh,
now I am the proud owner of that POS.
Oh, my gosh. That's perfect.
And they CGI the animals. And
All of them.
Yeah.
And they
There was not one real animal in the whole movie.
No.
No, not even the rabbits that they were chasing were they're CGI as well. And all the rabbits had to kind of just look like from Winnie the Pooh, where the dogs are running by and they had like a surprised look on their face, like animated surprised look. And Buck ended up looking more like Scooby-Doo from the Sarah Michelle Gellar live action.
Yeah, the live action film. Oh my gosh.
So
That's why I didn't want to watch it. I saw the trailer. I'm like, oh, this movie looks like crap just from the trailer. Why would I go see it in theaters? Because I don't like CGI. I mean, when I was growing up, I seen nothing but animal movies. Like that was all my mom let me watch as a kid. And they always used live animals. It's like, It's 2020 for God's sake. You don't have better training skills to actually train live animals. Is it like labor laws for other labor? What?
Even Cujo was a real animal.
I know. It's just crazy. I mean, I don't understand why they can't use real animals anymore.
I bet you they think it's cruel. The woke people think it's cruel to use animals. Actually, those animals are treated better than most human beings on set.
Right.
Okay, well, there was a film that came out recently. I'm gonna look it up. I'm gonna let Google do the talking here. There is a Willem Dafoe movie that came out recently. I was told that it's him and a bunch of animals. It's kind of along the lines of Call of the Wild, and they actually used all real animals in it. And I am trying my best right now. I'm scouring the interwebs to try and find the name of this film, but I am coming up empty. I watched Jeremy John's review of the newest Call of the Wild, and he mentioned this film, and I just can't seem to find it. Now I'm going to have to watch that review all over again.
I think
the only thing I come up with was Animal Factory.
Yeah, that's the only.
That don't look very good.
No.
That looks like a nightmare.
But yeah, I will sit there and say that I think if you're going to use animals, I think it's better to use real animals. And it's kind of weird because we had, we'll go more into the movie version that we're going to be covering, which is a bastardized version of the book anyway. But it's kind of weird because in the 1970s, you had a Disney film called The Incredible Journey, which basically had no humans in it, no narrative, no dogs speaking in their heads, and you had this dog and this cat trying to make their way home in the cross.
Oh, was that Homeward Bound?
No, yeah, that's the exact movie that I seen growing up.
Milo and whatever.
Yeah, well, they kind of did a remake of it back in the 1990s, and with Michael J. Fox voicing one of the animals.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
But the original basically had no voiceover whatsoever. Basically, you experience life with these animals, and that was it, sort of thing. And
he was the boxer. Michael J. Fox was. I love that dog. He was funny.
Hey, for the record, the Willem Dafoe movie is called Togo. It is also a Disney movie, and it came out in 2019.
Oh, okay. Togo. Yeah, I think I heard about that actually.
That's like that movie Hachi. You want to talk tearjerker? Hachi's like so sad.
Oh, I seen that too.
That and Marley and Me.
See, I think Lion King's probably ruined it for animals in movies now. So,
which one though? Are you talking about the new CGI one?
Yeah, the CGI one, not the animated one, but the CGI.
I didn't like the CGI. I mean, I didn't like the CGI one. It was lifeless. I mean, I think it was really amazing as far as the cinematography goes, but or not. Yeah, the
there was
CGI
no expression. There was none of this.
Exactly.
Their eyes.
There's no heart.
it was an uncanny valley kind of.
And
effect
anytime he got
because-
bouncy doing anything, I mean, God, she's horrible.
And Timon and Pumbaa were funny, but they have those Timon and Pumbaa moments, like Timon and Pumbaa. So
yeah,
because that was brilliant. That was one of the most brilliant cartoons I've ever seen. I mean, laugh. I mean, it was great. But they just
colorful too. You can't take one of the most colorful films in the entire, like, I don't know, older animated classic films, and then strip all that away and create like this lifeless but lifelike film.
Now I think it's probably a lot to do with it. Everybody's got to be woke about
something. I don't know. Yeah, it has to have something to do with it, because otherwise I have no explanation for why they do that.
Yeah, can you have a villain without Jeremy Irons' voice behind it?
No,
that was
probably not.
That was one of the points of that movie that it just did not sit well with me. When I think of The Lion King, I think of Jeremy Irons, because the best thing about any Disney movie is the villain, or at least it used to be.
I also think that the Disney animation, what they're always really good is that they don't hire actors because their names. They hire actors because they're good voice artists. And CGI,
they hire voice actors, yeah.
And CG, and this, that's the reason why Jodie Benson's, The Little Mermaid. That's the reason why Paige O'Hara's Belle. That's the reason why Robbie Benson's The Beast, sort of thing, and Jeremy Irons in Lion King, and Matthew Broderick as Simba in the originals. But now what you do is you get these CGI animals, and what they normally do, like in The Lion King, is they hire people for their names. So it's not because they're talented.
Like what's her face? Beyonce.
Bouncy.
Bouncy.
Grandmother called her Bouncy. My grandmother called her Bouncy because she didn't know her name was Beyonce.
That's so funny.
I don't like that Bouncy woman very much.
She does bounce a little bit, doesn't she, when she performs? Yeah. So it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Now, what are your going back to Call of the Wild? The Call of the Wild deals with the power of ancestral memory and primitive instincts. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that all animals have their primeval instinct still. I think
we do too.
Well,
yeah, we do.
Dogs do though. I mean, they even my idiot dogs go outside and they take their dump, and then they start kicking all the stuff up in the back, to cover their scent and whatnot.
Yeah, and you didn't teach them how to do that.
I'm not out there kicking up my But I mean, you see, like I said, my dog Blue and my other dog Copper, they would take off. I wouldn't see them for days. They'd be running in the woods, and I'm pretty sure we got coyotes all over back out in the outback of Princeton back in the day. This is 20-something years ago, and you don't know who they were running with, but they would come back eventually. Once Blue came back with a bullet hole in his back, but
a bullet hole. Did you say a bullet hole?
Yeah, I had a tape with the
dang.
somebody shot him with a 22.
Oh,
they
wow.
cut him just a 22.
Whoa.
One side
America.
But yeah, they probably thought he was a coyote, But I mean, I think that there's still an innate, DNA in the brains of most animals that they can revert back to, what nature.
Oh yeah.
What has been taken from them
especially with certain breeds, or I don't know, it's difficult for me to even discern like a difference between like cat or dog, because sometimes there are aspects to cats that seem more to have access to that, and then dogs sometimes seem to as well. But I think it must be certain breeds or something, because I don't know, I've seen cats that just go off and they're gone for days.
We got a cat's half feral. He's half feral. Everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's what it is, because I've never had cats before, but I lived with a roommate that had a partly feral cat that lived feral most of its life, but it was more domesticated than the rest of its siblings. So we actually adopted that one into the house. And I don't know, the minute that she hears like a sound of even a pretend mouse, or sees the shape of something that sewn to look like a mouse, she just goes after it. And then she ran away like out of the house and left for a while, but then she got kind of, I don't know, familiar with her surroundings, and only goes in certain areas and stuff like that. But no matter how long a cat goes missing, it's like most of the time, if they don't get run over, or if they're smart enough, they come back. So you got to wonder like where they go or what they do to survive for like the few days that they're out there. Because I mean, I know dogs probably do that too, but I haven't had a dog either since I was a kid. So I don't know all those experiences that most dog owners have.
Brother, he had his wild brother. But even now, we got coyotes out back. We got this park out back. Well, Chad knows what I'm talking about, but there's nothing out back. And you can hear them coyotes all night long. And they get every dog in the neighborhood going. Everybody's out there just howling and everything, So, I mean, they communicate.
I live a mile outside of downtown Dallas, and we have coyotes that run through the streets here at night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That happened to me when I was in New York,
running them out of their habitat with all the building going on.
Right?
Yeah, that happened to me when I was in New York, too, because I lived in the country parts, kind of in the middle of nowhere, literally in the middle of nowhere. And, I remember one time I went outside, just out of the front door, like I wasn't even, that far away from the house at all, but there's a coyote right there, and it startled the crap out of me because it was so pitch black outside, and I think we both scared each other, and it ran off.
We're more scared of us than we are of them. I hear
you. For the most part, I'm sure. Yeah,
people are cruel down here. They'll just shoot them. They'll shoot them and throw them in the back of pickup trucks, and it pisses me off every time.
That's insane.
No, I live in a very gentrified neighborhood right outside of downtown Dallas, and people are scared to death of their own shadow here.
Right.
I come from the country. I mean, Vicky, you and I lived in the same town for a very long time. And it's coyotes walking down the street in downtown Dallas. It's very frightening to a lot of people, but you're exactly right. They're building so much, they're invading their territory. And, the Trinity River, I guess some people would call it a valley. It's man-made.
Valley.
But I'm sure it's a game trail. I'm sure things walk up and down there all the time.
Easy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess you could sit there and say the civilized world, which seems to be quite strong, it basically turns out to be nothing more than a thin veneer, really. I mean, the reality that you are all living at the moment is a thin veneer. If something happens, electricity goes off and you're out without electricity and all your communication breaks down, you might resort back to the wild. Then what happens? And
I would hope so.
I mean, that's what, for instance, Vicky's one of her favorite shows, The Walking Dead, and that's what that show's about. It's going back and trying to keep social calls with your laws of civilization that you're brought up with, and that all gets torn away, and now you have to revert to the wilderness.
I got a lot of good ideas for that show. If the bottom really does drop out, make sure you stab them in the head the first time.
Right, not as a last resort.
I was lucky enough to have a father and a grandfather who taught me how to hunt, taught me how to fish, taught me how to camp, and then my military years behind all of that. I'd like to think that I would be okay to a certain point. To a certain point.
But when things break down, as you see, and even though that civilization and wilderness seem like polar opposites, they're not that different, because even in the wilderness, there are different periods of hierarchy that you have to do, and underlying social codes that are written in the wilderness in order to survive.
Right.
There's laws, there are unwritten laws that you have to go by. So no matter, even when you go into the wilderness, as we saw with Buck,
that's a really raw part.
There's still some laws.
That's just raw, though. It's still raw up there. I've got friends that live up there, and it's I would love to go. I've never been. But it's still quite wild, most of it.
The Yukon and
Alaska, the Yukon.
Yeah.
There's really, when you fly over it, there's nothing there. You know how when you fly over the United States, you can see lights, or when you fly over Europe, you see lights. You fly over Canada and those areas, there ain't shit. There's hardly any lights. For a city here and there. Canada's got it's a vast wilderness. It's just vast up there.
I mean, society breaks down, it'll be interesting, because any conflict that you have is gonna have to be done through blood.
Yeah,
blood fight.
That's true.
Instead of like reasonable mediation.
Can
we just sit down and talk about it? Like, no, I'm going to be killing you because
I'm going to go take over the closest IKEA and just live in IKEA.
Why would you want to live in IKEA? You'd have to sit there and you'd have to try to figure out how to put that shit together.
I could live in a different room of that place every day of the year and never live in the same room twice.
I hate putting anything together. Somebody says IKEA and it's like, son of a bitch, somebody bought me something from IKEA. It's going to sit in the box forever because I'm not going to try to put it together.
Well, you just live in the displays that are already put together, and then you use the rest of it for firewood to survive.
I don't know about you, but I'm going to Gander Mountain. Or I'm going to go down to the one down here at Rockwall, the big one. Oh,
the Bass Pro shop.
I'm going to live in the Bass Pro Shop and live really well.
I mean, I guess we also learn is that you have to provide provide on your own individualism, but at the same time, you're also going to have to learn how to survive in a group and how you find your way in that group.
Exactly. Yeah, because you have to be like a new kind of team member. You can't just be all about yourself, because if you are, you have less chances of surviving at that point. Because I don't think any of us can survive for, long periods of time completely alone. I mean, even if it's just for our own sanity, I think that we, at least need one other person. And I think it helps, I don't know, keep people's morale.
It would be a lonely existence in the wilderness. I mean, just think of what we got now going on with lockdowns and things like that. People are really losing it because
just from COVID. Yeah. Just from having to stay at home because of COVID. I remember when it first started. Just a couple months in, people were already losing their minds and getting really depressed. And, there's like a resurgence of like mental illness, running wild or whatever. Alcoholism, just really, really crazy, crazy things. So I don't know how people would cope in an actual epidemic. I'm like, thank God this isn't like, Walking Dead zombie apocalypse or something.
Not yet,
because
anyway.
I don't think people... Yeah, right. I don't think people would be able to survive that at all. You have to be you have to go to a place in your mind when things like this take place in order to survive. And I think if you fail to make it to that place, you have less chances of survival sometimes. Because not everyone seems to have that ability to do that. They just kind of break down or freeze, because there's all those different modes of survival, like fight or flight. Or just freeze up. Some people freeze up and then they get hit by a car, or they get, I don't know, macheted to death or something, or I don't know what happens in those circumstances, but use your imagination. But I think if you find that place inside of yourself, which is the more intuitive, animalistic part of you or any animal, I think you have better chances of survival, but also, getting along with others and knowing how to survive just based on your intuition and stuff.
Well, I mean, we were throwing rocks at the moon 50, 60,000 years ago, too. I mean, when you think about it.
I think Tom Hanks did okay with just a volleyball. I mean, it can be done.
Wilson!
I know. The worst part about that is when he had to pull his tooth out.
Yeah.
No, the worst part was when he lost Wilson at sea. That was the worst.
But I think, I guess what you have to realize is that only the strong are going to survive anyway.
Or
any kind of any kind of weakness that you have, or any kind of insecurity that you have within yourself. If you stand in life and that insecurity is your crutch in life to excuse you from what everyday life and to make excuses for the way that you are eventually going to be your downfall anyway.
Yeah, that carpet's going to be pulled out real hard from under your feet. And
that's what we're seeing, as you were saying with COVID. That's what we're seeing with a lot of people. People have a way of using crutches through their lives without actually surviving. And what basically has happened is that when you start pulling away the veneer of this, this uncomplicated life that they think that they have, all of a sudden that they find themselves, alcoholism, lonely, mental illness, they're probably, all these mental illness people are probably giving, birth to autistic children, because autism is now the new disease to have for your child, which our parents called bad behavior, which they used to get a slipper out, but hey, we're in the new world. But for whatever reasons, and this is that's what's quite interesting at the moment, is that you really need to make sure that you're able to survive on your own, because at the end of the day, my grandmother said that no man is an island, but they are an island if you're surrounded by sharks.
True.
Right.
But you're talking about extreme weather too. This is we grew up in a really cold place, but we had a lot of, the heat. snowmobiles, whatever. People used to hunt. Everybody put a deer in their freezer every year,
Yeah, but even like during the blizzard of 77 we lived through,
right,
which basically that we were snowed in for about 3 to 4 weeks, where basically you couldn't get out of your house because you couldn't get out your door.
That sucked, man. Well, it didn't suck for us because we didn't have school for like a month.
No, we didn't. But I remember having to go out to our attic and sliding down and we lived in a 3-story Victorian house, and you had to slide down out of the attic to get in and out of the house because that's the snow up all the way.
We were touching telephone, the light, the street lights. That's how high the snowdrifts were. It was terrible.
But I had to sit there and say what we had in 77, which I don't think we had today. There were support systems. I mean, I think we had our neighbors living with us, and we all pulled together, and that's what civilization does. What we're now finding with COVID is that there's not a lot of pulling together. There's a lot of, oh, woe is me, my life is so hard, oh, what am I going to do situations. And with our first lockdown, for instance, when we started that in March, I went to work every single day. But before I came home every night, I was going to the supermarket and making sure that the people in my neighborhood who are social distancing because of immunosuppressive diseases, I would do their shopping lists for them. And there's only a few people that are willing to do that. And I heard a lot of people bitching and moaning about, oh, it's so lonely, I'm so locked in. But no one wanted to go out and help their neighbor out whatsoever.
Yeah. There's really, we have changed as a society, and instead of, helping my neighbor, it's pretty much fuck them in a lot of different circumstances. And it's just like, we didn't do that,
Well, it's all nowadays about self-preservation. It's about keeping yourself alive. It doesn't matter what your next door neighbor.
Well, self-preservation, sometimes there's strength in numbers too, I mean, just like The Walking Dead, you're not going to survive very long on your own. You're going to have your own little, posse, so to speak. But as far as going back to being, wild and stuff, I even think man is completely capable of, reverting back to taking care of themselves. People have common sense for the most part, I think. Not lately as much.
I think a majority of people, what will happen is if something happens and man had to rely on themselves, the population will probably die out by 80%. The 20% left will be the ones to be able to do that. Because you have to remember people don't really know anything. I mean, ask a normal person where their steak is coming from. Most of them don't even fucking know. They don't even know they don't even realize that eggs what eggs come from. They just think they pop out of a chicken, not realizing that you need a rooster. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And people are not that bright, sort of thing.
No, they're not.
They think that all their meat's packaged, but ask them basically where ham comes from, and a large proportion of your people will not know where they go. They don't even know how to pick their own fruits and vegetables. They wouldn't even know how to. Most of them will die just by picking some berries and probably die from poisoning themselves.
Yeah.
Oh, there's mushrooms. My mommy's cooked mushrooms. I'll eat that mushroom there, but off they're dead.
Ooh, maybe I'll get high off this one.
So, but now another thing I thought was quite interesting about Call of the Wild was Buck's visions of a previous existence of going back to his I guess Neanderthal days, as the people would call.
They were little hairy men. He was remembering little like short hairy kind of men. I think is that what he was remembering. That's interesting.
Because nowadays, there has been a psychological study that's come out that some people who've gone through a great psychological disturbance in their life have had visions of their previous life. Unfortunately, their previous life always seemed to be their royals or something. But hey, no one's ever the poor slave doing nothing who basically means nothing. But they're now people. There is psychological emphasis now that basically they're doing studies at the moment that
what's it called? Cellular. You remember through your DNA or your parents. It's passed down.
Precisely. There's what I'm talking about. And that basically that there is some kind of memory in man that basically can go all the way back to when man first started.
Memory transfer of some sort from.
See, I've always had a theory that was possible too, just because sometimes people like have the ability to remember something or do something that, or like it's almost as if memory is transferred from one person to another. I was actually talking to John about that the other day, or many days ago, actually. And I've talked to other people about this too, because it's super fascinating. And that's what I think, like, intuitively, that's why, like, if you can access that, I think that you kind of become more in tune with yourself and are more acclimated to being able to survive or something. But you do have to wonder, like, sometimes if there was things before, all of this, like the reincarnation thing, like sometimes I wonder if, that's an actual thing, because I don't know how you can explain certain things, like being able to remember something that you've never actually experienced yourself. Or like some people have had, I'm trying to think of what it's called, but like if a kid is born and then they start remembering the details of someone who died 75 years ago, but like remember where they were, who their wife was, and all this other weird stuff. And it was some guy from like 75 years ago, and they look up the guy's name, and it's that all that information's true. Like, how do you get information like that? Because I remember reading an article about that. Like, I think some kid remembered some old guy's, someone who was already dead. He remembered like his whole life story. He remembered being in the military. He remembered like his wife's name. He remembered his name, how many kids that he had. And he was like a really young kid. I'm thinking like maybe between the ages of 10. No, I think he was between the ages of like, oh, hold on. What's going on? 5 to 10 or something like that. It was really crazy.
I want to say I've never had an experience like that. But maybe as writers, that's what we're all having. And we just, it's fiction. I'm going to put that in a book. And maybe it's bits and pieces of your former life. There's a theory. I'm not even stoned and I came up with that. That's great.
Right? Yeah.
I have read about...
Stone helps.
No, that's probably true, because even Native Americans and other ancient civilizations use things like peyote and, whatever to activate those things.
Native American, they those people used to take that shit off.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you think, well, actually, Native Americans, who has the actual Native American? I mean, they have a better grip on spiritualism and the wild than most, anybody, most white people. And I will say,
no, it's true, because that's all based on tradition, starting from like the roots of where they came from.
They incorporate their spiritualism with their life for the most part. And
exactly.
I've always found that beautiful and fascinating.
Yeah.
But I mean, they do have an understanding. It's like, I would rather, if I was going to go out with one of my Dallas friends into the wild, I would rather take a well-versed Indian with nature as opposed to one of my Dallas friends.
Right.
I'm going to survive a lot better.
Yeah. If you're going to survive, you might not want to take a city slicker with you.
No, that's what I mean. Just no city slickers. But I mean, just growing up, or we grew up, it was pretty brutal during the winters, and we didn't, Watertown was small. We didn't have a whole lot going on back then. And now I guess I don't know what's going on back there. I totally disengage from that sometimes. But there are people that live, those loggers and stuff, those guys that live up there.
Yeah, there are people. Well, there are people who migrate to the logging every of the year, sort of thing.
They live in the middle of nowhere, and they love it, and they hunt and whatever. They don't give a shit who's running for what. They don't care. They're not giving up their guns. They're gonna hunt. They're gonna live the way they want to. And there's a lot of people like that. There's a lot of people down here in Texas like that. They still live off the land to some extent. And so I don't think we're totally lost as natural beings. I think that somebody's going to have to survive.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I mean, with Call of the Wild, with Buck, when Buck attacks the Yeehats, I mean, that was the reason why Buck ends up in the wild anyway. The reason why he answers Call of the Wild, because his last tie to humanity when he's killed, when John Thornton is killed by the Yeehats, and Buck kills the Yeehats, basically killing what's bound him to the world that he knew.
You think that was it, or you didn't think it was vengeance? I mean, he saw his master dead. He saw his friend dead.
But this is the first time that Buck's actually retaliated against a human being ever.
Well, he tried to retaliate several times. He did not want to be kowtowed.
But he was beaten submission, wasn't he? But this is the first time that he actually was able to retaliate against man, kill man, which basically severs the ties from civilization to wilderness, which creates Buck into his new life. He becomes a legend, doesn't he? Buck has become
the ghost dog or something. Is that what he's called? The
ghost dog, and he breeds and fathers tons of dogs, and these dogs are huge, great big, wolf type dog animals at the moment, and it's become a thing of legend. Between that and the pulling of the sled, and because of his vengeance. What I also liked, which I thought was quite a nice touch to the story, is that every year on the death of John Thornton, where he kills Buck comes back, pays tribute to the one man that showed him kindness and goodness and treated him as an equal, and then take his family, and they would migrate back, and then every year, but they would migrate back to that point.
And he was probably, let's see, what was he? He was part Saint Bernard and Shepherd dog. Is that what he was?
Yeah,
Saint Bernard and Collie, I think.
Yeah, I mean that would be a really sizable animal. Probably.
He's Saint Bernard Scotch Collie mix.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Saint Bernard Collie dog.
This portion of the podcast has been brought to you by Wikipedia.
Yeah. Which I can't live without.
Right?
Now, since Chad is a writer, I thought that you probably like some of the foreshadowing that Jack London does use. There's quite a bit of foreshadowing, the urges that Buck feels pulling him into wild foreshadows his eventual transformation to a wild creature. And I find it quite interesting that back in this day, between about 1850s to about 1940s, foreshadowing was used a lot. Charles Dickens was basically the king of foreshadowing. So, but I thought
modern day readers don't recognize that as foreshadowing. They recognize that, it's a weak plot. I could tell that was coming from a mile away.
Mm-hmm. So I thought that's what I like foreshadowing. I like the idea that you get this little seed planted into you, and then all of a sudden it's like, then further on down, it's like it grows into this. It grows.
Title of the book, Call of the Wild, is
right.
Foreshadowing.
Exactly. I think it's almost like a perfect, maybe allegory or metaphor for, I think the reason why people like this story is because it is kind of a metaphor for, the human hero's journey as well. Buck kind of goes through his own, but it's almost as if Buck is kind of a metaphor for our own inner animal, our own capability to, be in a situation like this and, become one with nature. And I think humanity, most of us at least have this desire to become one with nature. And I think that's why, like you hear of all of these different alternative religions, like witchcraft or Wicca or whatever, or some kind of spiritualism, because that's all about like being one with nature and using nature to, I don't know, imbue you with powers, or I don't know, just something. There's people want and they feel power in nature. They feel connected to nature. And I think people still want that, but we live in such a technological world. I think people do struggle to find that. I think people struggle to even put down their phones and enjoy a hike,
Right. Because Jack London spent a lot of time in the Yukon.
Yes,
before writing this book. I mean, as research, I don't know of any modern authors who really do that will just place themselves into the situation that they're going to be writing. Now,
he was poor too. He just traveled around.
A few years ago, when I was writing Far From Home, the sequel to my werewolf novel, A Taste of Home, it was going to take place in New York City, and I just happened to have a job to where I was in New York City like every other week. So I really got to experience New York City. And I think it translated well into the book. I went to a lot of the places that I was going to write about. But I mean, most authors nowadays, I mean, you have the internet, you have YouTube, you and that's how they'll do their research. But I mean, there's really nothing like feeling a location or smelling it or just the energy, experiencing it. So it's,
and I think even that definitely makes a huge difference. I think I don't even some big Hollywood films and stuff, I don't even think they do their research that well, because there are some
inconsistencies
to certain locations or experience something. It's just all of these crazy things that I just don't think people actually do their research like they should, even though they have the internet at their disposal, or they could go somewhere and experience something. I think sometimes they just make it up as they feel like they do.
I think Hollywood has been going on a downward trend.
I think so too.
They have not come up with anything original in years, or at least by my
No, that's totally true though.
It's like, thank God for this podcast. I discovered independent film, and I watch a lot of independent film now, and it's a breath of fresh air.
Honestly, yeah.
But sometimes they don't. They take too much artistic license with something.
Yeah, and I think the reason why there's such a huge fascination with horror is because I feel like horror is the one experimental genre right now, even especially in the independent world. But I've seen more fascinating horror films than any other kind of film in ages. And when I was growing up, I feel like there was constantly something new. And obviously I was growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s, but I feel like lately it's all totally declined. And so now I have to find stuff even older than that. And that's why I love, doing this podcast. I like watching vintage things, right. Which, you just can't find anything that compares to being as good. Like even something like Bewitched or, the shows and the films that we cover are so much better than a lot of the stuff that Hollywood is like regurgitating now, because it's all regurgitated stuff that's already been done a million times over. No one is a pioneer of anything. No one's coming up with anything new. And if it is, I wish someone would show it to me, because I need like some new stuff, because nothing new is coming out anymore. It's all sequels.
Who would have thought that the best thing to come out of 2020 film wise would be a Bill and Ted movie?
I know. I have yet to see it too. Has anybody seen it before we get off track again?
Vicky, I'm just going to have to give you my voodoo password, man. I've got like hundreds of movies on there that I've purchased.
Is it worth watching?
I loved it.
Okay, because I loved the other two.
It's just as stupid as the other two, and I loved it.
That's great. It's like, I might rent it tonight.
So I guess we get into our final thoughts of the book. So Leandro, what are your final thoughts of Call of the Wild from 93?
I really enjoyed. I would like the way that in every problem that Buck was having, he was more connected to the wild side of himself and was helping him to go through that. When I watched the movie, that one, it happened that there was the actress has lost his husband, and kind of like there was a kind of a connection that both of them were connecting with more like part wild of like start a new story, but then the man appear again. I really, really enjoy it. I like that part what you said about when he was seeing like a vision of another life. And I have read several books about that, connecting to all those topics, and I like it. I think that is possible, and as someone said about like they discovered that emotions that can be transferred by family or other generations through the DNA.
Yeah,
that's for example, then when someone said to you, for example, that person looks really similar to maybe a great grandmother or father, right? Or maybe has the same attitude, that it was impossible that these two people know each other and pass it by. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed that part of the book, and yeah. I would recommend it to read it. The movie, I enjoy it, but it was not really accurate the same way that the true to the story of the book. I know that they have to make a twist because having a movie of an hour and a half focusing on a dog story, like from the dog point of view, on that time would have been really hard. Maybe in these days with technology will be easier to make. Yeah, but at the same time, imagine if they would make the movie with all that bad time that he had in a dog point of view, will be like, to watch it will be too harsh. I imagine when you read it, it's like, it's not nice and you pass it by. But when you see the graphic images, will be like, I don't know, there was one part, there was a dog that was shoot like cold, boom, and that will be hard to watch and then carry on watching the movie like nothing has happened. I really enjoyed this book.
What about yourself, Jesse? What are your final thoughts of Call of the Wild? Of the book.
I liked that it served kind of as a reminder to be more in touch with that aspect of myself. I don't know, whenever I, digest something that's, like a piece of art or a film or a book or something like that, I think it always speaks to a part of myself, an aspect of myself that, I don't know, needs addressing or something. I always get like very philosophical about stuff. So that's kind of what, where it put me, it kind of reminded me to, be more intact with that aspect of myself, and to maybe take a step back from technology and think of other ways to be more with that part of myself, I guess. I don't know. I've always liked animals and stuff, and I think I've always admired them for that, because they just always seem to be there, or just they can jump from, being a docile, man-loving animal to being able to go on the hunt within a matter of minutes. Sometimes, not all the time. It depends on the breed, I suppose, and how small they are, or how big.
That sounds like Dallas on Friday night.
But you know what I mean. Yeah, I don't know. It kind of served as a poignant reminder to be more in touch with nature, and maybe put the phone down and go out and do something, and maybe find ways to become more in tune with nature, I guess.
And what about yourself, Vix?
I just like that. I just think it's a great boys book. Not that girls wouldn't like it, but it really just, that white thing, it's just a great little boys book or whatever. Because I know they got the versions where it's a little easier of a read, for younger folks. But I think it's a great book. And it is. It's all about, like you said, the foreshadowing is like right in the title. Kind of what's going to happen without even reading the book. And it's about this dog, and he goes through and these people, and it's just like, it's just like human endurance and animal, canine animal. It's just so much suffering, for one, to get from point A to point B. And I just think it's just one of my favorite books, and I forgot how much I liked it. And it was a page turner, and it's a short read. Like I didn't know it was a serial. I guess everything we're reading from this era seems like it's turned into a serial for some reason. I guess that's what Keith was explaining how they did back then. Like I said, I always learn something every day. But it's a great book for anybody. I mean, it is. You do kind of escape into it, and it's sort of like, it's not like Cujo, but if you read Cujo, you get into the dog's head too, So it's kind of cool seeing the experience from the dog's point of view, how he's looking at people, And I'd say that Buck had people down pretty good for a dog. So, but I thought it's like a nice little inspirational story.
What about yourself, Chad?
Oh, this book, it kind of, I don't know, maybe like celebrates and investigates the human spirit through the eyes of an animal, really, like difficult times. This book was written 118 years ago, I believe now, and very, very difficult times to live through, especially in the Yukon, Pacific Northwest, that area, 118 years ago. But humanity's living through really difficult times right now. And I think reading this book could possibly, help people realize a few things about themselves, about life in general. especially, like Vicky said, introducing this to younger people. I think it was great. A lot of people would go for the films. I think this book they've tried to translate it into film 5 different times now. Mm-hmm. And through every version, they focused on different things, and they all focused on the wrong things. 5 different directors were unable to get this right. So yeah. I would recommend reading it. Like Vicky said, there's versions of it that are a little easier for younger minds. I love this book. It's a great book. I would highly recommend it to anyone.
In my view, is A Call of the Wild. I think it's one of those books that needs to be read sometime in your life. Though I do think it's one of those books that might be fine if you're younger, but I think when you get older, I think it probably means a lot more than if I was younger. I also I didn't say that if you're into horror novels, this book kind of hits the marks of that as well. There's so many horrific moments in this book. So much drama. I have to sit there and say that, going on Buck's journey with him, I have to say I was horrified. My heart soared parts of it. I was sickened to death by some of it. And I had to sit there and say that out of the books that we've covered so far for season 4, this is probably one of my all-time favorites now. Mm-hmm. And I had to sit there and say that, yeah, and even in the end, I have to sit there and say that when I closed it, my heart kind of welled with so many emotions. But when I finished it, that I think it's good. It's still, even now, I finished the book a month ago, and it still brings these feelings to the foreground.
Kind of a bittersweet ending, Yeah. There's really no other way to describe it. It's sad, but yet it's elating.
Yeah, and it just, I don't think there's not a lot of books that equal that. I think Count of Monte Cristo comes a bit close to it, but Cristo. The gay porn version. But I think because was such a long, expensive journey, that book, that I think that because they're so concise, and I have to admire Jack London for his writing. So concise, to the point, and meanwhile he does it with and keeping all the emotions and everything intact. So it's, yeah.
Well, he did kind of live through some of it. I'm just wondering how, in the research, it doesn't really say how much he lived through, because apparently he got scurvy and had to leave the Yukon because there was no fresh fruit and vegetables in the winter up there. So he decided to, go home or wherever, get back to California. But I mean, he obviously saw quite a bit, and he made it relevant to his stories.
Well, sometimes when you get a book that's short, and I mean, let's face it, I mean, this is a long journey that we go on with Buck, but it's a short novel, and be able to get all the emotions and all the adventure and everything that's connected into this, and be able to do it well in such a concise way is, hats off to, because I think another author, this probably would have been 300 to 500 pages.
I think it was just long enough. Any longer, I mean, sometimes they just beat it, down. And it's just like, don't keep adding to it. This is perfect the way it is,
Music Lab.
From the co-writers of the Amazon top-selling serial story, Timeslingers, comes a new, full-cast audiobook, Death of a Bounty Hunter, a supernatural steampunk western. 14 different characters voiced by 11 professional voice performers. A Korean bounty hunter named Flint finds himself in the middle of an occult plot to steal a powerful relic from an innocent woman.
Get me the Iron Spur, and I will show you true power.
Caught between the desperate sheriff who's becoming unhinged at the worst possible time.
He mutters the word like a curse dipped in sarcasm. I draw my gun and shoot him between the eyes.
And the phantom woman haunting his nightmares.
The living always think the dead are worse off.
Flint will have to make a choice. confront the sheriff's posse of misfits, or run. But he's losing time. An ogre of a man with a Gatling gun for an arm. The brash and headstrong Pinkerton agent, Geraldine Abernathy. And a young, speedster idiot ludicrously named Fancy Dude. They'll all converge at the home of a widow who's lost everything but possesses the relic they all desire, the Iron Spur.
Damn that trinket to hell. I don't care what it is or what it does or why the Duskfinders want it. I care about my children.
Death of a Bounty Hunter. The weird western you've been waiting for. Available on www.deathofabountyhunter.com.
So that brings us to Call of the Wild, the 1935 film, which is an American adventure film. It's an adaptation of Jack Wilde's 1903 novel, The Call of the Wild. The film was directed by William A. Wellman and stars Clark Gable, Loretta Young, and Jack. The screenplay was by Gene Fowler and Leonard Proskins and omits all but one of the book's storylines. What we're going to do is cut to the trailer of this bastardized novel, Call of the Wild, from 1935.
You're about to take your last look at Mr. Thornton's handsome, smiling face. So make the most of it, you weasel. Look it. Tell me if I'm seeing things. Look it. Holy mackerel. It's gold, Claire. More gold than I've seen in my whole life. Oh.
I wish you hadn't.
Why not?
Oh, I hadn't let myself think about us. I didn't dare.
Why?
I don't know. But I've had some sort of strange premonition. Something I can't exactly explain, but...
Explanations belong 5,000 miles away.
May I?
Yeah, sure.
I wouldn't presume to teach you feminine psychology. But I might add, very humbly, of course,
Yeah.
that if a woman is asked to do something, she's more apt to obey than when she's commanded.
Hello, welcome back to Literary License Podcast, and now we're discussing the 1935, which will be short but sweet, discussion of this film, Call of the Wild. So, Vicky, what are your thoughts of the film, Call of the Wild, starring Clark Gable and Loretta Young?
I like my old movies, but, I guess after reading the book and then revisiting this one, I haven't watched this one in, like 30, 40 years. I think I watched this with my grandfather who used to live with me. And, I'd forgotten about it. And I mean, I guess it was an okay story, but it was kind of a mushy love story, kind of, sort of. And it kind of detracted from the survival aspect of it, the story, because this is old Hollywood. So you got to have, Loretta Young and Clark Gable, doing kissy face and all that other stuff. I mean, it wasn't a bad story. I mean, I was more interested in the backlighting of what was going on during the filming of the story as opposed to the story, because I didn't know Clark Gable was such a turd. I knew he was probably a turd, but not that much of a turd. But it wasn't bad. I mean, the ending, it was they kind of incorporated the bittersweet ending. Everybody got to cut their losses. Everybody has to give up something. So there was no utopian happy ending for that, but it was a good movie. I mean, I'd watch it again.
What about yourself, Chad? What are your thoughts of the 1935 film?
Well, I was unable to locate a copy of this, and when I did locate a copy of Call of the Wild, it was the most modern one. Disney, but I was able to piece the movie together through small like YouTube clips, and it focused on the wrong aspect of the story. There was nothing in Call of the Wild that was a love story at all. It was but I guess that's what you had to do back then in Hollywood to get people's attention, to get them to come into a theater and pay a week's wages or whatever it cost to see a film back then. And it reminded me almost of the same kind of movie that Hollywood remade over and over and over again back then, with different backdrops. I half expected to, other than Clark Gable, it reminded me almost of an Audrey Hepburn film where they placed her in a movie with a man who was like 40 years older than her, and tried to expect the audience to accept the fact that she's going to fall in love with that old dude. But I don't think they should have called it Call of the Wild. Not at all. It had very little to do.
It doesn't really represent the book at all. And I mean, there wasn't really a whole lot going on with Buck either,
No,
Buck he was not the main character. So.
Buck was a prop. That's what Buck was. He was a prop in that film.
I mean, it's a good romance story if you like romance, but it wasn't Call of the Wild.
A bodice ripper.
I can guarantee you that no one, well, I can't say no one, but I'm sure almost anyone has never picked up a copy of Call of the Wild as a romance novel. So
yeah.
And if they did, they have problems, and that's a whole different discussion, man.
Yeah.
Oh no.
And what about yourself, Jess? What are your thoughts of the film?
No, I was disappointed by that, actually. I mean, I don't know what they were going for, or like who got that idea that, Call of the Wild, perfect setting for a romantic, I don't know, love story or something. They must have seen, I don't know, that one Marilyn Monroe film that was like more serious when she was, what was that movie called? Had something to do with her being like on the river with like this man and his son or something like that. I forget what.
Oh, is that
one? Yeah.
The River of No Return with Robert Mitchum.
Yeah, for a second I was thinking.
Yeah, they must have been more inspired by that or something. Because I'm like, I don't know where they would have got that the idea to make. But yeah, Call of the Wild, perfect setting for a romantic love story. But yeah, it felt like it was trying a little too hard to be maybe a bodice ripper, which is like a whole different like story altogether than what the book is about. I don't get what people think when they decide to take a book like that and then turn it into a film like that. I mean, yeah, I like vintage movies too, like Vicky said. But I still require that they at least follow the vein of the original story that they're telling. Otherwise, it's like, what's the point? If you can't even follow the message, the story, the narrative, I guess they just didn't want to rely on a dog to tell a story or something. I mean, I don't know. I don't know why they failed in that department.
I mean, I watched this, and then I watched 3 other versions of Call of the Wild. And I have to say the best version is an animated 30-minute version of it that's available on YouTube, which is actually fantastic and sticks to the facts of the book. I think it was done by Ranskin and Bass, same people who did Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Did they have a hand in like any of the older like Lord of the Rings movies too, or am I thinking?
Yeah, the first Hobbit they did as well.
Okay.
Sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, as far as calling this Call of the Wild, I think that sometimes Hollywood made movies of these classics, and I think they did it for teachers. And the reason why I think they did it for teachers, they wanted to make sure that the student actually read the book and not see the movie. Because if they just saw the movie and went in and did the test, they would have been flunked really badly. There are a couple things I did like. I mean, as far as the movie is concerned, a movie based not on Call of the Wild, but just a movie with Clark Gable and Loretta Young, I think it's a decent movie.
It's a decent movie.
But as far as Call of the Wild, what I will give it kudos is I think this is probably the best Buck that I've seen in everything, as far as the way the dog looked and the way how big the dog was.
Because he looks like a Saint Bernard, basically. He looks like a crossbreeded dog. But while we're on dogs, though, they had a Great Dane as Spitz. A Great Dane with no fur was not going to last in Alaska very long pulling a sled. Okay.
Another thing that I think that they got right is I think the dirtiness of the town that they were in. When you went to Darrow, it was dirty, it was filthy. The people were dirty and filthy, and I think they got that right as far as that goes. And I think that which this film does, what the 2020 doesn't do, and the 2020 skips over this, is the great big sled where there's the bat with sled. sort of thing. And I thought that was well done. And that's pretty much all that you get of Call of the Wild is the dirty town and Buck pulling the sled and the breed of the dog. Outside of that, it doesn't really stick to a lot. Looking at the movie, what the movie doesn't get right is, it's been pointed out by everyone else, is a love story, so on and so forth. I have to admire, though, what I did like about the movie is Oakie, his best friend.
Right.
Clark Gable's best friend. I thought he was brilliant. It amazed me how Loretta Young was able to put her makeup on while they're going dog.
Oh my God, I don't know how she kept it on during half of those scenes. I mean, no, who was made up like that? That was just unrealistic, but this is old Hollywood.
Even her hair. I mean, that front curl thing that was going on in the front of her forehead. That was interesting. But yeah, it's a really bastardized version of a fantastic story. But as I was stating before, I did watch 4 different versions of this, and I have to sit there and say I have to agree with Chad. There's never been a decent version of this. And I think that the only way you can get a decent version is you're going to have to do it from the dog's point of view and tell your story through the dog. But then again, and then you gotta take the human actors out of it, sort of thing. I mean, yeah, you can have the special guest stars, like, bringing them in, like the 2020 has Harrison Ford from beginning to end, and he's playing John Thornton, which comes in at the end of the book.
I have to see that.
And I think if you were going to do a successful adaptation of this, you kind of have the Perot, the first guy. Sorry, I forgot his name. You can do those as actors, and then do Mercedes and the 3 as actor. Famous actors, and you can have them like cameos in this dog's life. And that would, but I don't think. The thing is, I think that what Hollywood's trying to do is they're trying to make a star vehicle for an actor. And if you're going to spend a lot of money on Harrison Ford or Clark Gable or Charlton Heston or whoever you're going to use, you kind of want, you're going to use that money that you spent on them and make sure you have them from beginning to end. And the only way that I think that Call of the Wild could have been made fruitful is actually if you probably starred Rin Tin Tin or Lassie in it. So that way you paid the price if you're the elite actor and go from beginning to end. But there's no way that, and I also have to sit there and say that I don't think there's ever going to be a good adaptation of this, because I'm not sure if the world wants to get attached to Curly and then see Curly ravaged by savage dogs. I don't think they want to see a dog get shot because he wouldn't move. And to be honest, I really don't think that you really want to see Buck get the shit beat out of him, because even the 2020 version, what we do get is we get Buck hit once, and that's to a shadow. Buck lies down, the guy threatens to hit him again, and that's it.
The Charlton Heston version, it got pretty down there. It was, the clubbing and stuff. I just like, it's just a movie. They're not actually beating the dog. But you're right, though, because a lot of these dogs, the horrific way they die, especially. Well, they showed it in this particular movie, though, where the sled goes into the water. Yeah. So that everybody died on the ice in this particular version.
Yeah, though it wasn't Mercedes, though it wasn't the people that were supposed to. It was some guy that Buck grew a dislike this man. He wanted to keep buying him so he can kill him. And then they pop up.
Oh, I know. He got this that old man, and he shows up in a bathtub. Who's going to sit in a bathtub out in the middle of winter?
I did like his death sequence, though. I thought when they got way down by the goal, I did like that sequence. Like, yeah, fucking asshole died. And then I've never seen anyone talk with his bottom teeth out as much as that guy did. It's just like
serious underbite.
Precisely. And he's just one of those Hollywood villains that you just hate from beginning to end. There's very few people that can pull that off. That he's like, you see him and you hate him automatically.
Yeah, what was his name? I'm trying to figure out what his name was. He wasn't Joe Groggins. He wasn't Sam. Who was he? Mr. Smith, maybe? Reginald Owen?
Reginald Owen, yeah, that's it.
But, he was just a very unlikable sort.
Yeah.
He just hated that dog. The whole movie.
Mr. Smiths just get a bad rap in movies, don't they?
Yeah, they do. It's such a common name, I guess.
Generic asshole, Mr. Smith.
Basically.
It
It was
I
pretty.
mean, I've never seen Loretta Young in a movie before. I think I saw her like in an airplane movie once or airport movie, one of those. But I've never actually seen her in her heyday. So I guess it was good to see her. It's always good to see Clark Gable. So I'll give Clark Gable in. But I have to sit there and say that Jack Oakie, he was brilliant. You know, I have to sit there and say that he made the movie for me. But, you know, would I buy a copy? Would I see it again? Probably not, sort of thing.
Well, the thing is about before Loretta Young, though, was like we were talking before we started recording. It's just like Clark Gable attacked her and got her impregnated during filming.
Oh Lord!
Which is Clark Gable's only son.
No, it was a girl. It was a daughter.
A daughter. Oh, he's got a son as well. I think he only had like 2 or 3.
Judy Lewis, 1935 to 2011. The pregnancy was widely assumed to be the result of an affair. However, in 2015, Linda Lewis, Young's daughter-in-law, stated publicly that Young had confided to her before her death that Gable had raped her.
So basically, we're now knowing that Loretta Young's like looking at you going, "You're a daughter. You're my daughter from rape. Your father's Clark Gable. He raped me."
So she passed away.
And then holds on to that until her deathbed, and then tells her daughter, "Before I die, just let you know that Clark Gable raped me. He's your dad." Dies.
I know, like that's the last thing on your mind.
Precisely.
It's like Clark. This is not why it's called Call of the Wild. Did you not read the script, man?
But I have to say that he does have. I mean, he does have finesse. I mean, the only Clark. I don't know too many Clark Gable films, but to be honest, I mean, I always have Gone with the Wind. So it's quite good to see Clark Gable do another kind of film. Because I'm not familiar with a lot of his films.
I liked his acting in a lot of his films. I mean, you know, he was from the day of Dashing. You know, where men actually wore like manly clothes and not rompers. You know,
I would suggest that he kept that off his resume, though. He's got a lot of finesse for a rapist.
He does, you know. But then again, who you don't know because none of us were born. Clearly,
true.
But
well, I have to say, he did wear his trousers awfully high. I think they were like almost above his belly button, weren't they? Like,
that was the style back then. Though. That was the style.
You reach over his shoulder and grab his wallet.
Richard Chamberlain in The Count of Monte Cristo. Of course, being tight too.
I have to say, Loretta. I mean, I'm still floored by Loretta Young's makeup job. The way they're like, you know, Vaseline the lens and softly focused her when she's looking, and
the lighting, to make her more beautiful and translucent.
I think the more we talk about it, the more pissed off I get about the fact that they made that the butt of the movie. It's like, what the hell? It's not Bonanza, for God's sake.
I have to sit there and say, though, I did enjoy the film, but not because it was called The Wild, but I did enjoy the film as a film itself. But not
if you can look at it from that point, it's different. But when you're trying to make it about, this is Call of the Wild reinterpretation.
Well, it's not the.
So I have to there say that
it's not at all.
Maybe
it's not even a wild
for Clark Gable, you know, off screen.
Yeah, exactly. But that's not what the movie's about. Is off-screen life.
I have to say though that when Clark's playing around with Buck in the film, and you know before they toss him onto the
drooling,
ground,
the dog's got all that drool all over.
Well, it looked like the dog was actually attacking him. It didn't look like it was playing. The dog was like, "I'm going to kill you," sort of thing. And then they crawl, and after a while, it's like they crawl.
I wonder if they had more than one dog.
I'm kind of like, "Oh, you do." At that point, it's like, "Oh, I think Buck's going to kill him."
I don't know. I thought that they seemed like they were genuinely playing. I often wonder, back in the day, did they have more than one dog? You know, people nowadays, you got to have more than one animal to perform.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to be honest, you got to remember that the animal code back in these days wasn't prevalent. So, and I have to there say that I got a feeling that if they did do in 1935, if they did do a live version of a movie version of Call of the Wild, that they probably would have had the dogs viciously kill the other dog on screen. You would have seen that, and it would actually happen because if animals died on screen, they normally died in life. If a horse got shot in front of you and you see the horse die in front of you in a black and white, normally the horse was getting killed, sort of thing.
I read
you
somewhere.
Can tell the dogs the dogs were actually kind of getting into it.
I read somewhere that there was a silent movie version of Call of the Wild that was filmed before this one. It's just impossible to find.
No.
Well, they did start removing or redoing a lot of the old silver screen, and when sound finally came, they did redo a few,
Yeah, they actually redid a lot of them. And Count of Monte Cristo is another one that went from silent to sound. I think A Christmas Carol, we're doing the first sound production of it, but there is a silent film before that.
Yeah.
Treasure Island, there's also a silent. We saw the first sound version of it, so we're watching the first sounds of these classic novels, sort of thing. Which I'd sit there and say, so far there's yet a movie that we've watched so far that's been even a spit on the classic novel itself on any of them. So.
Yep, 1923, Call of the Wild. They did do a silent one.
And I bet you those animals, any animal that got killed there, probably was on screen, probably was killed in real life in that one in 1923.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's put it now. I mean, now because of the way animal rights are and stuff like that, animal rights, before people writing us or sending us emails, I believe in animal rights, so hold off there unless, don't send me any nasty emails about animal rights. But the cast of Friday the 13th have now had to apologize vocally because the snake that's chopped in three quarters, I mean, 2/3, it was a real live snake.
What
now
movie is this?
Friday the 13th for
I'm trying to think. I don't remember the snake. Which one movie? The first one?
Yeah, the
first one. When they all go in and Adrian King's in there going, "Oh, there's a snake in my room," and they all come in, and Kevin Bacon has the machete, and he hands it over, and he hands it over to Bing Crosby's son Harry, and then they go, and Kevin Bacon jumps on the bed. The snake comes crawling out, and he goes, "I got it." And they chop the.
I didn't know that was a real snake.
Yeah, it was a real snake, sort of thing. So now they had to go through and apologize for killing a real snake.
Well, they really would like Cannibal Holocaust or Cannibal Ferox.
I was watching Friday the 13th, the week of Halloween, and I was watching that scene over and over again, and I was like, how did they do that? How did they, did they cut? Did they swap snakes? And that just answered my question. Thank you. Because that scene would have been impossible to film unless they actually killed the snake.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because last week I was actually reading some newspaper and it said that Sean Cunningham, had to outwardly apologize for killing a real snake due to animal rights. People getting really upset. Like, here we are. How many years ago was that? I mean, it's like 31 years ago.
Was it?
1980.
1980.
Yeah, the first Friday the 13th. Yeah, 1980.
So here we are.
wow.
40 years, 30 years later, and here's let's apologize. So.
No, it's 40 years, Keith.
40
it's
years.
40 years. We don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear that it was 40 years ago, but damn it, it was 40 years ago.
It was. I was 15. I went to movie theaters and saw it when I was 15.
Oh, I would have been 7 years old. So,
fuck you.
Hey, come on. I'm right behind you guys. I'm right behind you.
Yeah. I loved it, though. That's what they're saying. It's the first time I saw something that graphic in a movie theater. And the people we snuck in, the people were freaking out all the way through. They had to keep leaving and going into all that jazz. they couldn't handle the violence and the horror of it all. And I'm sitting there just loving every moment of it.
That's sorry. I went to go see Dracula with the Gary Oldman version. And I went into that and I had my ex-husband with me. And he was so bloody. He got up and left. He couldn't even to let
Wow, really?
I was like, oh, come on, really? I sat there and watched it. So.
I couldn't get through the bloody accents, the bad English accents.
Oh yeah, well yeah.
Speaking of Dracula, did anyone see the new TV show from Netflix?
No, that's a BBC series and horror bastardization version.
No.
I want my TV license money back from the BBC because of that.
I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard bad reviews.
Don't waste any time of your life on that.
Okay,
what about Haunting of Bly Manor? Anyone caught that yet?
I liked it.
I liked it as well. Total opposite of Haunting a Hill House, but equally as good.
Yeah.
I like the slow gothic romance of it all, and,
Yeah.
and the slow burn of it. I just quite
Yeah,
like
and that the two girls, well, we thought they were going to end up together, but they didn't end up together. That was
lesbians. A lot of lesbians in that one.
Well, it's what we have until the Splatter Western series hits Netflix.
Splatter, which I'm really looking forward to, actually, because I can't get enough gore in my life these days.
I tell you,
I'm looking forward to the new Resident Evil TV series.
Yes.
Oh, I know.
Heck
I'm excited for that too. I've been saying for ages I've wanted them to do something like that, because as much as I love the movies have very little to do with actual video games. So
Yeah,
I would love
exactly.
to see them take the video game series and actually use the mythology within the game, because it's really fascinating, more expansive than I don't know. They based the Resident Evil films more off of Alice in Wonderland than they did actual Resident Evil, which was super confusing. I just don't know where they were going with it, but I still love those movies.
I love them because of Mila Jovovich. I mean, she's one sexy little.
Exactly.
Yeah, she is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She is my favorite.
Yeah. Even when she's pregnant, she's sexy. Give her that.
Yeah. She's a beautiful woman.
So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this up. And so, comparing book to screen, which do you prefer? Call of the Wild. Starting with you, Chad. Which do you prefer, the book or this movie?
The book, by a long shot. The book over any adaptation of a film for this, by far.
Yeah.
And what about yourself, Jesse? Which do you prefer, the book or the film?
Well, you know, I need a little more romance in my dog movies.
Like you can watch 101 Dalmatians.
Oh, yeah, that was probably partly inspired by that. But yeah, I need more romance in my dog movies, you know. It's just, you know, dogs aren't very romantic. So I need to see the
Lady in the Tramp.
I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, obviously.
Come on, Jesse. They are romantic. They have their own style named after it. I mean,
there you go. Thanks for that.
Yeah, but obviously I like. Yeah, but obviously I like the book is much better and has a lot more to say. Obviously, because that was, you know, I always go with the author's original intent. That's why. Even if you take a really popular interpretation of like a comic book film or a film that's inspired by a book or comic book series or something, I always go with the author's original intent and compare it, because they know what they meant to say, but sometimes the person reinterpreting the work doesn't seem to understand what the author was getting at, which is kind of crazy, because usually that implies that the person trying to reinterpret the story was a fan of the work. So I don't know how, you know, those things happen, but I definitely like the book better because, you know, it has something to say and everything's there. Like if you want the story, just read the original thing. Don't go see any of the movies, because the movies have little to do with the book. And the 2020 version apparently is like butchered because they're trying to make everything woke, which I hate. I hate woke things, because when you play it safe, you have nothing to say. There's no substance there. It doesn't speak to real life. It's just beating around the bush, sugarcoating everything, and making everyone feel like they live in a cozy, warm, safe bubble 24/7. Which is exactly the opposite of what Call of the Wild is even about. It's about getting outside of your comfort zone, living life, experiencing and surviving, you know, tragic things. And the 2020 version of the movie does not do that because they're keeping it safe. So they failed with that one.
And what about yourself, Vix?
Oh, definitely the book. I mean, I saw a couple different versions. There is a series out. Is it Netflix or is it Amazon Prime? There's a series. I didn't watch any of that yet, but it's like 4 or 5 parts to Call of the Wild. I didn't watch it. I think it's a completely younger Jack London character for John Thornton. But, you know, I agree. It's just like people don't like to see the nasty side of life anymore, even though we live it every day as a this year. And there's really no reason to sugarcoat anything anymore. But woke really sucks. I mean, it's just like, it's not realistic. So yeah, I mean, if I want, I'm not into people delivering me hot chocolate and pizza. Although I do have my dogs, but I think the book was fantastic, and I think that the old silver screen movie was kind of interesting. But that was old Hollywood silver screen, and you had to have the romance because you really didn't do anything about romance. So it didn't have anything to do with Call of the Wild. So Jesse, everything you said, I say ditto. But I mean, I didn't hate the movie.
Yeah, we're going to hold out for the Rob Zombie version.
I didn't see the new one y'all were talking about, so I guess I won't watch that one either. So I don't want my dog CGI'd. I love
CGI animals.
Yeah,
I love CGI animals.
Sort of like what was that one movie with Cuba Gooding Jr. and
shoot, now I forget what it's called.
With the dogs, and he goes, what's his name? He always plays in westerns. Oh my god! But he's going, you bit the dog's
I know who you're talking about.
Demon. That was the name of the dog. Demon. He goes, you bit the dog's ear, because he wanted to show who the boss was. And Cuba Gooding Jr. bit the dog's ear. Demon.
What is that movie? Isn't it just something with dog in it? Snow Dogs. Snow Dogs. That's what it's called.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that movie was hysterical. I like Cuba, so he's funny.
I like his dream sequence. You need to learn to relax.
Yeah.
With the Eskimo chick on the beach and eating blue cheese cookies or something. That's disgusting.
But I mean, it's just, you can't have fun anymore. Everybody gets all upset. But no, the book's fantastic. White Fang
you can't
is
defend
fantastic.
anyone.
I mean, these are all great kids' books.
Oh, I can't wait to see the CGI 2020 woke version of that movie.
Of what?
White Fang.
Well, they'll probably make it. Did they make it?
It's coming. I read where Jack London sold off the rights to pretty much everything before his passing. So
that's sad.
And he sold it off pretty cheap too. So I'm sure Disney has a big hand in all of it. So
Disney's gotten too big for their britches. I wish a company would come in and just start, Disney's everything. It's just like we need variety. I wish there was just another.
I know. When you buy up even the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you limit what they're even able to do, because if you read the comics, Marvel is, it potentially gets pretty dark. So when you Disneyfy characters that are potentially dark, maybe gory, like, someone like Deadpool, or even something darker that has to do with like magic and witchcraft and gore and stuff, then you can't show any of that because it has to be the Disney version of what that looks like. So
now they took off the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Somebody bought the rights, and you have to have you got to buy cable to watch Rudolph the fucking Red-Nosed Reindeer and all that shit. It's like,
jeez.
It's like, stop, I mean, you watch that every year.
I know.
When you're a kid, you put on Rudolph, you put on the Great Pumpkin.
I have them. I have a box set with all of them on Blu-ray, so I just pulled.
Yeah, well, you know what I'm talking about. You knew it was fucking Halloween when
I don't watch anything on network television anymore. Does anyone watch network television?
I don't.
No, I guess I don't. I guess I don't know.
I don't even know why we have it still. I need a Roku TV.
Right.
My view of this is, I think that Call of the Wild is a fantastic novel. I think that everyone should read it. The movie version of this, the 1935, unfortunately, it's a good movie for what it is, but it's not a Call of the Wild movie.
Nah.
I would keep away from the 2020, though there are some fantastic sequences in the 2020 version. There's some themes I did enjoy.
But it's not worth watching.
It's not worth watching. And there has yet to be a good Call of the Wild film, though there is a really good animated. If you put in Call of the Wild animated on YouTube, you'll get the 30-minute one that's done by Baskin and.
What's that called again, Keith? I'm sorry.
Call of the Wild by Rankin and Bass.
Okay.
And it's 30 minutes. That one's probably the best that you're going to see of this story, though it does lacks some emotional resonance to it, but it does have
Right.
all the facts in it, sort of.
Well,
thing.
I didn't think this book was really emotional. I think it had a lot of emotion, but as far as feelings, it's pretty much to hell with your feelings when it comes to this book.
Yeah, but your feelings are with Buck and the humanity of Buck. That's why the ending that you get has such resonance, because you're on this journey with Buck and you identify with Buck and the horror that he goes through.
Did anyone not see Watership Down? I mean,
yes.
The new version or the older one?
No, the old version.
Oh yeah, I
didn't-
love the old version. I
British
couldn't make through the first episode of the Netflix one.
No, I haven't. I probably will not touch that ever. I just don't touch new stuff unless I hear someone say that it's good. Someone that I trust.
It's up there with Dracula on Netflix.
Ugh,
Don't do
God. Okay. I heard the Netflix Dracula, he started out with a really bad Transylvanian accent. Then the minute he feeds off of someone, he has a British accent all of a sudden.
That brings us to the end of the Literary License podcast, Call of the Wild. I'm by Jack London. Next month, our classic novels is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, and we got some special guests joining us for that. Yeah. And our next episode will be Witch, season 1, episodes 9 through 16. The following week, we're doing a 2-for-1. We'll have the director from Eight-Legged Freaks joining us, and we'll be covering the film Them from 1951 and Eight-Legged Freaks. And of course, Dark Shadows will be finishing the month off, and that will be episodes 419 to 439. So I want to say thank you to our special guest. So thank you, Chad, for joining us.
No problem.
Thanks, Chad.
Thank you, Vix.
Yep.
Say good night, Vix.
Good night.
Say good night, Jesse.
Have a good night, folks.
And don't forget to like, share, and comment on our YouTube and our social platforming. And make sure you sign up to our newsletter at www.llpodcast.com. And make sure you check out Chad's new book, which we'll have at the bottom of the show notes. So we'll see you next week for Bewitch, Season 1, Episodes 9 through 16.
This has been a Literary License Podcast production. Until next time, and do not forget to comment or share. We would so admirably appreciate your support.